The weight of the ring felt like an anchor in her trembling palm. It was cold, heavy, and worth more than she had ever possessed. Yet she had to give it back. Beatrice Lytton stood in the pouring rain, her thin cloak soaked through, staring up at the imposing facade of Ashworth House. She was here to return the Duke's ring, to settle a debt she didn't understand, and to beg for enough money to save her dying brother. But she never could have predicted what the cold, ruthless Duke of Ashworth would do when she presented it. He wouldn't just refuse to take it. He would do the unthinkable. The rain fell in merciless, icy sheets, turning the streets of Mayfair into a slick mirror of grey misery. For Beatrice Lytton, it was a fitting backdrop to the single most desperate act of her life. Her gloves, worn thin at the fingertips, were useless against the chill, and the dampness had seeped through her patched boots, numbing her toes. But the cold in her feet was nothing compared to the icy dread solidifying in her stomach. In her reticule, wrapped in her late mother's only silk handkerchief, was the ring. It was impossibly heavy, a square-cut sapphire the colour of a midnight sky, flanked by diamonds that seemed to drink the meagre light. It was the Ashworth ring, a relic of a promise made before she was born, and her father's final, desperate instruction. "You must never use it, Beatrice," he had whispered on his deathbed, his voice a dry rasp, his eyes already clouded. "It is not a gift. It is a debt. Only if Arthur, only if you have no other choice." That day had arrived. Arthur, her younger brother, was fading. The small room they rented in a Bloomsbury boarding house was freezing. The landlord's threats were growing louder, and the doctor had been blunt. Without proper medicine and warmth, Arthur would not see the spring. No other choice was no longer a distant fear. It was a brutal, immediate present. She had walked the 3 miles from Bloomsbury because she could not afford a cab. Now she stood before the towering monolith of Ashworth House. Its windows blazed with light, mocking her poverty. Wiping the rain from her face, which only succeeded in making her feel colder, she forced her feet up the gleaming stone steps. She raised the heavy brass knocker, her heart hammering against her ribs, so hard it hurt. Before her nerve could fail, she let it fall. The sound was a dull, definitive thud, swallowed by the storm. Seconds later, the door swung open, revealing a butler so tall and severe he seemed carved from granite. He surveyed her, from her sodden bonnet to her mud-caked hem, with an expression of profound disdain. "Yes?" His voice was as cold as the marble floor he stood upon. "I am here to see His Grace, the Duke of Ashworth," Beatrice said, surprised her voice worked at all. "My name is Miss Beatrice Lytton." The butler, Huxley, did not move. "His Grace is not receiving, especially not individuals without an appointment." His gaze flickered to the street, implying that was where she belonged. "It is a matter of the utmost urgency," Beatrice insisted, clutching her reticule. "It concerns his father, the late Duke. Please, just tell him it concerns the Lytton debt." That name, Lytton, caused the barest flicker in the butler's impassive eyes. He hesitated. "Wait here." He did not invite her in. He simply left her on the doorstep, the wind whipping her skirts and plastering wet strands of hair to her cheeks. She shivered violently, humiliated, but resolute. Arthur's pale, drawn face floated in her mind, and her shame was burned away by a flare of protective anger. After an eternity, Huxley returned. "His Grace will see you. Wipe your feet. Thoroughly." Beatrice was led through an entrance hall, vast enough to contain her entire boarding house. The air was warm and smelled faintly of beeswax and old, important money. Her damp boots squeaked shamefully on the polished floor as Huxley led her to a set of towering mahogany doors. He knocked once, opened them, and announced her. "Miss Beatrice Lytton, Your Grace." She stepped inside. The room was a library, dark and imposing, dominated by a desk the size of a carriage, and behind it sat the Duke. Julian Devereux, the Duke of Ashworth, was not an old man. He was perhaps 30, dark-haired, with a face that looked as if it had been carved from the same hard material as his butler. He was known in the ton as the Iron Duke, a man who had inherited a title mired in scandal and debt, left by his reckless older brother who had perished in a yachting accident, and who had, through sheer ruthless will, restored its fortunes. He did not rise. He simply watched her, his eyes a startling, pale grey, devoid of any warmth. He was in the process of sealing a letter, and he took his time, pressing his signet ring into the hot wax with deliberate, insulting slowness. "Miss Lytton," he said finally, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated with power. "You have 5 minutes. Huxley informs me you spoke of a debt. My family has no outstanding debts." Beatrice walked forward, her legs shaking. She stopped before the massive desk, the physical representation of the gulf between their worlds. "Your Grace," she began, her throat tight. "I am not here to make a claim on your finances. I am here to settle a debt, to return something." His eyebrow rose, a fractional, cynical movement. "Return something? I have no acquaintance with you, madam. I cannot imagine you possess anything of mine." This was it. Her hands trembled so much she fumbled with the clasp of her reticule. Finally, she retrieved the silk-wrapped packet and placed it on the desk, pushing it across the gleaming wood. "My father, Thomas Lytton, passed away 2 years ago," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "He instructed me to return this to you. He said it was a promise made by your father, the former Duke, and that its return would settle all obligations between our families." Julian Devereux stared at the small, silk-wrapped object. He looked annoyed, as if she were a street vendor trying to sell him a cheap trinket. With a sigh of impatience, he tugged at the silk. The ring tumbled out, spinning for a moment, before settling on the dark wood. The sound in the room vanished. The only noise was the hiss of the fire and the frantic beating of Beatrice's heart. The Duke froze, his pale grey eyes fixed on the sapphire. All colour drained from his face, leaving his skin a taut, waxy white. He looked from the ring to her, and for the first time, his cold indifference was shattered, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. "Where?" he whispered, the sound terrifying in its intensity. "Did you get this?" "It was my mother's," Beatrice said, "given to my father by yours. He called it the Pledge of the Dales. He said your father gave it to him, after mine saved his life in the great fire at the Pulteney Hotel." Julian stared at her, but his eyes were seeing something else, entirely. "The Pledge of the Dales," he repeated, his voice hollow. "A ridiculous theatrical name. My father was a romantic fool." He looked at her, his gaze sharp and calculating now, the shock replaced by a cold, sudden suspicion. "And you? You are Thomas Lytton's daughter?" "Yes, Your Grace." "And you have come here, on this day, to return it." He said the word as if it were poison. "How convenient." "I don't understand," Beatrice stammered. "Don't you?" He stood abruptly, his height dominating her. He was a powerfully built man, and his anger was a palpable force in the room. "You come here with a ring I thought lost forever, a ring tied to the single most ludicrous, binding, and insane contract my father ever signed. You come here, a week after my engagement to Lady Somerset was broken, when all of London is whispering that I need a wife. You, the daughter of the man my father made his pledge to, And you claim you are here to return it?" He laughed, a short barking sound that held no humour. "Do not play me for a fool, Miss Lytton. You are not here to return it. You are here to enforce it." Beatrice recoiled as if struck. "Enforce it? Your Grace, you are mistaken. I know nothing of a contract. I was told it represented a debt." "A debt!" Julian's voice cracked like a whip. He snatched the ring from the desk. "This is not a token for some paltry monetary loan, Miss Lytton. This is the Ashworth betrothal ring, the one reserved for the Duchess." He held it up to the firelight, the sapphire glowing like a hot, blue coal. "My father was a man of grand, foolish gestures. Your father, a mere gentleman farmer at the time, dragged him from a burning hotel in Bath. My father, drunk on gratitude and brandy, made a pledge. He signed a document, a legal, binding contract, stating that the debt of his life could only be repaid by the union of our blood. He promised his heir to your father's first-born daughter." Beatrice's blood ran cold. "He what?" "A marriage pact," Julian sneered, his lip curling. "The heir of Ashworth, pledged to the daughter of a Lytton. A medieval, idiotic arrangement I have spent the last 5 years thanking God was moot. We were told your family had removed to America, that you had all perished of a fever." "We did not," Beatrice said faintly, her mind reeling. "We lived in Devon. We were not wealthy. But it was not until my father's investments failed that you found yourself in desperate straits," Julian finished for her, his eyes narrowing. "And in your desperation, you suddenly remembered this charming family legend. You located the long-lost Duke and arrived on his doorstep, ring in hand, claiming innocence." "That is not true," Beatrice cried, her own anger surging past her fear. "How dare you? I came here today for one reason. My brother Arthur is gravely ill. We are to be evicted. I am destitute. My father told me this ring represented a debt. I believed he meant a monetary one. I came here to return your property and to beg," the word tore from her, "to beg that you might see fit to give me a small sum, enough to pay for a doctor and a new room." "I never a marriage?" The idea was so preposterous, so horrifying, that she almost laughed. She held out her hand, her palm open. "I do not want your ring, Your Grace. I want to return it. I want to settle the debt as my father instructed, and then I will leave and you will never see me again. Please. My brother is all I have." Julian stared at her outstretched hand. He looked at her face, truly looked at her, for the first time. He saw she was not a cunning seductress. He saw the genuine, threadbare poverty of her cloak, the desperation in her rain-chilled face, the raw honesty in her eyes. She wasn't lying. She truly had no idea what she was walking into. This, somehow, was worse. His anger deflated, replaced by a cold, heavy weariness. He had spent his life cleaning up the romantic, catastrophic messes left by his father and his older brother. And now, the worst one of all had just walked in from the rain. "You cannot return it, Miss Lytton," he said quietly, his voice flat. "I must. It is yours." "No," he said, turning the ring over in his fingers. "According to the contract, which I have read, and which is filed with my solicitors, this ring belongs to you. It has been your property since the day you were born. My father, in his infinite wisdom, transferred legal ownership to your father, to be held in trust for you. It is your dowry. It is the physical manifestation of the pledge." Beatrice felt the floor tilt. "No, that cannot be. It is worth it. I cannot accept it." "And I," Julian said, his voice hardening again, "cannot accept your refusal. Do you understand what you have done? By bringing this here, by identifying yourself, you have activated the pact. My father's solicitors were charged with finding your family upon his death. They failed. I was free. Now, he paced to the window, staring out at the storm. Now you are here. The pact is known to my legal team. It is known to my aunt, Lady Ophelia, who delights in such family dramas. If you walk out that door, and it becomes known that the daughter of Thomas Lytton lives, and that I refused her. Refused what? I am refusing you. It will not be seen that way, he snapped, whirling back to her. It will be seen as me dishonoring my father's most sacred vow, and I am in no position to have my honor questioned. Beatrice was lost. This was a nightmare. What position? A sudden, sharp rap on the library door saved him from answering. Huxley entered, bearing a silver salver with a single damp envelope. This just arrived by courier, Your Grace. It is marked with the crest of Lord Shaw. Julian's face darkened. Give it to me. He broke the seal. His eyes scanned the note, his jaw tightening until a muscle leaped in his cheek. With a growl, he crumpled the paper and threw it into the fire. He's moving on the shipping contracts, Julian said, more to himself than to her. The Somerset engagement was meant to block him. Now that it's broken, he believes I am vulnerable. He thinks he can ruin me. He looked back at Beatrice, but his eyes were different. The anger was gone. The shock was gone. All that remained was a chilling, profound calculation. He looked at her as if she were a piece on a chessboard. Your Grace, Beatrice whispered, frightened by the change in him. You came here for money to save your brother, he stated. It was not a question. Yes. Medicine, a warm room. He will have the finest care. I will send my personal physician, Dr. John Snow, to see him this very hour. You will be removed from your lodgings and given rooms here at Ashworth House. Tonight. Beatrice's heart leapt with a frantic, desperate hope. You will do that? But in exchange for what? I have nothing. Oh, but you do, Miss Lytton, Julian said, his voice terrifyingly soft. You have the one thing I find myself suddenly, inexplicably, in need of. He walked back to her, stopping so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. He still held the ring. Lord Shaw believes I am scrambling for an alliance. He believes I am weak, desperate for a suitable wife to secure my position. He is right. He looked down at the ring, then back up at her face. But he is looking for me in the ballrooms of Mayfair. He is watching the daughters of earls and viscounts. He will never, ever be looking at you. Beatrice's breath hitched. What are you saying? You are here to return this ring, he said, his voice a low, hypnotic rumble. You are here to settle the debt. And I am telling you, the debt is not monetary. The debt is you. And I am a man who always, always honors his family's obligations. He took her left hand. It was cold, damp, and trembling. His own hand was large and startlingly warm. I cannot take this ring back, Miss Lytton, he said. The pledge cannot be broken. It can only be fulfilled. And then, to her utter, soul-shattering disbelief, Julian Devereux, the cold and ruthless Duke of Ashworth, dropped to one knee before her. He did not look like a lover. He looked like a general accepting the terms of a surrender. You cannot return it, he said, his pale grey eyes boring into hers. You can only accept it. Marry me, Miss Lytton. Be my Duchess. Save your brother. And in return, you will save me. The world tilted. The hiss of the fire, the ticking of the grand clock on the mantel, the pounding of the rain against the windows, all of it faded into a dull, roaring sound in Beatrice's ears. A proposal. It was the single most absurd, terrifying, and insulting thing that had ever happened to her. This man, this duke, was not offering her his heart. He was offering her a cage in exchange for her name. He was using her, a piece of flotsam washed up on his doorstep, as a shield against his enemies. "No," she whispered, snatching her hand back as if his touch were scalding. "Get up! You are mocking me." Julian rose slowly, his face impassive. "I am not mocking you. I am being practical. You are a pragmatist, Miss Lytton. I can see it in your eyes. You walked 3 miles in a storm to save your brother. You are not a swooning romantic. So I will not insult you with pledges of affection I do not feel." "Affection?" she cried, the word bubbling up with a hysterical laugh. "You despise me. You believe I am an extortionist. I believed that, for a moment. I now believe you are simply the solution," he said, his coldness more brutal than any insult. "A solution that has, quite literally, fallen into my lap. My rival, Lord Gideon Shaw, is a snake. He has been trying to undermine my family's shipping interests for a year. My engagement to Lady Somerset, a woman with powerful political connections, was a strategic move to block him. She, however, had the poor taste to run off with a penniless cavalry officer. It has left me exposed." He gestured to the note burning in the grate. "Shaw is moving to consolidate his power. The Board of Trade, my partners, they see my broken engagement as a sign of instability. They want to see the Ashworth line secured. They want to see a duchess. A marriage to them means stability, legacy." "And you think I am that?" Beatrice said, gesturing to her dripping cloak, her worn dress. "I am a nobody. I will bring you no connections, no power. I will be a scandal." "Exactly," he said, a sudden, dangerous light in his eyes. "You will be a thunderbolt, a mystery, while Shaw and the rest of the ton are trying to figure out who you are and where you came from. I will have bought myself the time I need. A quick marriage, a fait accompli. By the time society uncovers your humble origins, I will have already outmaneuvered him. And as my Duchess, no one will dare to slight you. My name will be your shield, just as your presence will be mine." He laid out the terms, his voice as crisp and emotionless as if he were discussing a livestock purchase. "You will marry me. By special license. Immediately." "Immediately?" she choked. "This week. You will become the Duchess of Ashworth. In return, I will not only pay for your brother's care, I will ensure his recovery. Dr. John Snow is the finest epidemiologist in London. He is currently studying the cholera outbreaks in Soho. He is a man of science, not a society quack. If anyone can save your brother, he can. Arthur will be moved into this house. He will have warm rooms, nursing, the best food. He will want for nothing." He paused, letting the offer sink in. It was a masterful, cruel, and perfect temptation. Arthur, warm. Arthur, safe. Arthur, alive. "And you, Miss Lytton," he continued, his voice softer, "will never be cold or hungry again. You will have the protection of my name, a place in society, and a financial settlement that will ensure your comfort for the rest of your life, even if this arrangement should not be permanent." "You mean when you tire of me?" she said bitterly. "I mean that I am a man of business," he corrected, "not a monster. I am offering you a contract, your security for my convenience. It is a far better bargain than the one you came here to make." Beatrice's mind was a whirlwind of rage and sickening, terrible logic. He was right. The pittance she had hoped to beg from him might have kept them for a month, perhaps 2. But this was salvation. It was Arthur's life, but the cost was her life. "It is not a marriage," she said, her voice trembling. "It is servitude." "It is a partnership," he countered. "One with clearly defined benefits. Your part is simple. You will be my wife in public. You will stand by my side at functions. You will be dignified, and in time you will provide me with an heir." The clinical-sounding word hit her like a physical blow. An heir. She felt nauseated. "I need to think." "There is no time to think," Julian said flatly. "Shaw is acting now. I must act faster. And your brother, does he have time?" That was the final, brutal checkmate. Arthur did not have time. She looked at the ring in his hand, the ring her father had saved, the ring her mother had owned. A ring meant to be a pledge of honor, now twisted into a tool of coercion. "You said Arthur can live here?" "With me?" she asked, her voice small. "Of course. He is your brother. He will be my brother-in-law. He will be treated as such." She closed her eyes. She saw Arthur's face, thin and trusting, his hand reaching for hers in the cold, dark room. She saw the landlord's sneering expression. She felt the gnawing, endless hunger in her own belly. And then she looked at the Duke. He was watching her, his face unreadable, his pale eyes giving nothing away. He was a devil, perhaps, but he was a devil offering her the one thing she craved. "Very well," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "I accept your proposal." A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Relief? Triumph? It was gone before she could name it. He did not smile. He simply nodded, as if a contract had been signed. "Good," he said. He took her cold, limp hand. He did not ask for permission. He slid the heavy sapphire ring onto the third finger of her left hand. It was shockingly cold and far too large, but it settled on her finger with the damning finality of a manacle. "Huxley!" he called out. The butler appeared instantly, his face a mask of professional indifference, though his eyes darted to the ring on Beatrice's hand. "Your Grace?" "Miss Lytton will be my wife." "She is the Duchess of Ashworth," Julian stated, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Her brother, Mr. Arthur Lytton, is gravely ill. You will dispatch a carriage to Dr. John Snow's residence at once. Give him this." He scribbled a note and a generous bank draft. "And instruct him to meet me at what is your address, madam? 22, Fripp Street, Bloomsbury." At 22, Fripp Street. Send another carriage, the large landau, to that address to await my orders. And send for Mrs. Finch. My fiancée will require a new wardrobe. Immediately. Have her send for a seamstress from Bond Street, and prepare the Duchess's suite of rooms, and the adjoining suite for Mr. Lytton. Huxley's stoic facade finally cracked. His jaw dropped slightly before he snapped it shut. "Yes, Your Grace. At once, Your Grace." He bowed, this time a deep, respectful bow that was directed at her, and backed out of the room. Beatrice stared at the ring. Duchess of Ashworth. It was a lie, a sham. "Now," Julian said, pulling the bell rope again. "You will have a hot bath, and Mrs. Finch will bring you something to eat. You look half-starved." "I am going to my brother," Beatrice said, her voice finding a sudden, sharp edge of steel. Julian turned. "You are in no condition." "I am going to my brother," she repeated, meeting his cold gaze with her own. "I will not leave him. I will ride with you and the doctor to fetch him. I will be the one to tell him he is safe. These are my terms, Your Grace. If I am to be your partner, you will learn that I do not abandon my family." For a long second, they stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Julian, surprisingly, was the first to incline his head. "As you wish. Duchess, we will go together." The journey to Bloomsbury was a blur of surreal, jarring contrasts. Beatrice sat opposite the Duke in the velvet-upholstered, perfectly sprung carriage, a world away from the jarring, bone-rattling omnibus she occasionally could afford. The man himself was silent, staring out the window, his profile harsh in the flickering gaslight. He had wrapped her in a heavy fur lap robe, a gesture she wasn't sure was kindness or merely a practical desire to not have his future Duchess freeze to death. Dr. John Snow met them at Fripp Street, a kind-faced, sharp-eyed man who seemed utterly unfazed by being summoned by a duke to a derelict boarding house. While Julian dealt with the apoplectic landlord, a confrontation Beatrice was spared, but that involved the duke's voice never rising above a glacial murmur, and the landlord's face turning a mottled purple. Beatrice and the doctor hurried upstairs. Arthur was worse. His breathing was a shallow, wet rattle, and he was burning with fever. "Beatrice?" he mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. "It's cold." "I know, my love, I know. But it's all right. I'm here." "I've brought help," she whispered, smoothing his lank hair. Dr. Snow was efficient, his examination swift and gentle. He listened to Arthur's chest, took his pulse, and looked at his tongue. "Congestion of the lungs," he diagnosed quietly, "and malnutrition. He's weak, but the fever is strong, which means his body is still fighting. He needs quinine, a mustard plaster, and constant, warm hydration. This room," he said, with a grimace at the drafty, peeling wallpaper, "is killing him. He is being moved," a deep voice said from the doorway. Julian filled the small room, his massive frame and expensive greatcoat making the space seem even more pathetic. He looked at the sick boy on the cot, his expression unreadable. "Doctor," the Duke said, "you will have everything you need at my home. A carriage is waiting. Let us remove him at once." The journey back to Mayfair was a testament to the power of wealth. Footmen carefully carried Arthur, wrapped in a cocoon of warm blankets, and placed him in the carriage. Beatrice sat beside him, holding his hand, while the Duke and the doctor rode opposite. At Ashworth House, a new world awaited. A suite of rooms, warm and bright with firelight, had been prepared for Arthur. A nurse, stern but competent, was already waiting. Within an hour, Arthur was settled in a soft bed, his chest rubbed with plaster, and a warm, medicated broth spooned past his lips. He was asleep, his breathing already seeming a fraction easier. Beatrice sat by his bed, tears streaming silently down her face, her body shaking with the release of months of terror. "He will be well looked after here." She jumped. The Duke was in the doorway of the adjoining room, her room. It was a vast, opulent space, decorated in pale blues and cream, with a fire blazing and a copper tub steaming in the corner. "Thank you," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "Whatever else this is, whatever you are, you have saved him. I will never forget that." "I am a man of my word, Miss Lytton," he said. "Now, I suggest you avail yourself of the bath. We are to be married in 2 days. 2 days? At St. George's, Hanover Square, by special license. It is all arranged." He turned to leave. "Your Grace?" He paused. "I will honor my part of this," she said, finding her strength again. "I will be the Duchess you require. I will not shame you, but I ask one thing in return. Besides my brother's care." He waited. "I ask you that this remains what it is. A contract. I am not your wife in truth. I am a partner. I will provide the heir you require. But I ask for respect and my own privacy." Julian's face, for a fleeting moment, was shadowed by something complex. Was it sadness? Regret? It was gone. "You will have my name, my protection, and your own chambers. I will not trouble you, madam," he said, his voice cold once more. "Unless, of course, you wish it." He left her, the click of the door sealing her into her new, gilded cage. The next 2 days were a whirlwind. Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, was a tall, thin woman with a face like sour milk. She clearly and profoundly disapproved of Beatrice. Seamstresses descended, bringing with them bolts of silk, velvet, and muslin. Beatrice was pinned, measured, and fitted for an entire new life, from morning gowns to riding habits, to, most chillingly, a simple, elegant wedding dress of ivory silk. She saw Julian only at dinner, a stiff, formal affair in a dining room that could have seated 50. They ate in near total silence, the cavernous room swallowing any attempt at conversation. She spent every other moment at Arthur's bedside. With warmth, medicine, and nourishing food, the change was miraculous. The fever broke on the 2nd day. Dr. Snow pronounced him weak, but on the mend. "You're like a princess, Bee," Arthur whispered, looking around his grand room. "Is this real?" Beatrice forced a smile. "It's real, Arthur. You're safe. Just rest." On the morning of her wedding, Beatrice stood before the mirror. The ivory dress was beautiful, modest, and impossibly expensive. Mrs. Finch had sent a maid to dress her hair, sweeping it up in a simple, elegant chignon. She looked like a stranger, a pale, wide-eyed ghost, pretending to be a duchess. There was a knock. Julian entered, already dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. He looked, she had to admit, impossibly handsome, but also as remote as a mountain peak. "It is time," he said. He held out a small, flat box from the jeweler Garrard. She opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a simple, breathtaking string of pearls. "A wedding gift," he said. "They are beautiful." "But you didn't need to—" "Of course I did," he interrupted, his voice clipped. "You are to be the Duchess of Ashworth. You will look the part." He fastened them around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin. The touch was impersonal, light, and yet it sent a strange, unwelcome shiver through her. They were married at 10 o'clock in the morning at St. George's, Hanover Square. The church was vast, cold, and empty, save for the rector, a verger, and 2 witnesses dredged up from Julian's legal team. Beatrice said her vows in a clear, steady voice. She was not marrying a man. She was signing a contract. Julian's vows were equally steady, his deep voice resonating with cold iron. He slid the sapphire ring, now fitted with an internal guard to keep it from slipping, onto her finger. "I now pronounce you man and wife." The Duke turned to her. In the cold light of the church, his grey eyes were unreadable. He hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then leaned in and brushed his lips against her cheek. It was not a kiss. It was a sealing of a document. "Your Grace," she murmured, giving him a small, polite curtsy. "Your Grace," he replied with a curt nod. They walked out of the church, man and wife, into the waiting silence of their new life. The new Duchess of Ashworth was, to Julian's surprise, not a hindrance. He had expected a weeping, frightened girl who would need to be managed. He had instead acquired a silent, watchful, and startlingly competent partner. Beatrice, now referred to by the staff as Her Grace, threw herself into 2 tasks, the recovery of her brother and the running of Ashworth House. Arthur, now attended by the best tutors Julian's money could buy, was thriving. The colour had returned to his cheeks, and his cough was gone. He adored Julian, following him around the house like a loyal puppy, fascinated by the Duke's tales of his shipping empire. Julian, to Beatrice's shock, was gentle with him. He treated the boy with a gruff, almost paternal kindness, even taking him to see the horses at Tattersall's, promising to teach him to ride. It was the one crack in his iron facade, and Beatrice found herself watching those interactions with a strange, complicated ache in her chest. While Julian was in the city, battling Lord Shaw in boardrooms and at the Exchange, Beatrice took on the house. Mrs. Finch, the sour housekeeper, presented the household accounts to Beatrice with a barely concealed smirk, clearly expecting the upstart to be baffled by the complex ledgers. "If you would prefer, Your Grace," Mrs. Finch said with false deference, "I can simply continue to manage the books and provide you with a summary." "That will not be necessary, Mrs. Finch," Beatrice said coolly. "My father, before his difficulties, believed a woman should be as educated as a man. I have been managing our own, albeit smaller, household accounts since I was 15. Please leave them with me." Mrs. Finch's smirk faltered. "As you wish, Your Grace." Beatrice spent the next week in the estate office, submerged in numbers, and the numbers did not add up. The sums were not large, but they were consistent. Overpayments to the butcher, bills for wine that never seemed to arrive in the cellar, a recurring, significant payment to a jeweller, Garrard's, for repairs to the family jewels. Beatrice, who had yet to even see the family jewels, found this highly suspicious. She also noticed the comings and goings of a thin, obsequious man named Mr. Davies, the family's junior solicitor. He seemed to be at the house constantly, consulting with Mrs. Finch, and more frequently with the Duke's aunt, Lady Ophelia Devereux. Lady Ophelia was Julian's only living relative, a sweet, bird-like woman who had fluttered in the day after the wedding, cooing over Beatrice and pinching her cheek. "My dear, what a shock! But how romantic!" she had chirped. Her eyes, Beatrice noted, as sharp and assessing as a magpie's. "To think my brother's old pledge. Julian is so like him, so honourable. He never does anything by half, does he? But you must be so lost in this big, draughty house. You must lean on me, child, and on dear Mrs. Finch. We will guide you." Beatrice did not trust her. She did not trust the overly solicitous Mr. Davies, and she certainly did not trust Mrs. Finch. She decided to start with the jeweller. She took a carriage to Bond Street, to the Garrard flagship store, and introduced herself. The name Duchess of Ashworth parted the crowds like a ship's prow. The manager, Mr. Thornton, bowed low. "Your Grace, how may we be of service? Are you here for the emeralds? Mr. Davies was just in last week to finalize the payment for their cleaning." Beatrice kept her face smooth. "The emeralds? Yes. I have misplaced the receipt. Could you possibly draw up a copy of the invoice? My husband is so particular about his new accounts." "But of course, Your Grace." Mr. Thornton bustled away. He returned with an invoice. The amount was staggering. And it was not for cleaning. It was for the sale of the Ashworth emerald necklace. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. The necklace had been sold 3 weeks ago, before her marriage. "Mr. Davies handled the transaction, you say?" she asked, her voice steady. "Oh, yes, Your Grace. As always. He brought the piece in himself, on behalf of his Grace, of course. He said the Duke was liquidating assets to fund a new shipping venture. Very discreet, he said. The Garrards, her mind racing. Julian was fighting Lord Shaw. Was he so desperate for funds that he was selling off the family jewels? But if so, why was he paying for Arthur's tutors and her own lavish wardrobe? It made no sense. And if Julian hadn't authorized the sale, then Mr. Davies was a thief. But he couldn't be acting alone. A solicitor couldn't just walk into Ashworth House and take the crown jewels. Someone had to have given them to him. Mrs. Finch. It had to be. The housekeeper, the one who disapproved of her, the one who controlled the keys, the one who was overly familiar with the solicitor. Beatrice returned home, the invoice clutched in her hand. She felt a cold, righteous fury. She was the Duchess of Ashworth. This was her house, and these people were stealing from her. From Julian. She found him in the library, where she had first met him. He was rubbing the bridge of his nose, a stack of papers in front of him, looking exhausted and grim. "Julian," she said, forgetting the "Your Grace." He looked up, surprised. "Beatrice, is something wrong?" "I think so," she said. She walked to his desk and laid the invoice from Garrard's down. "I believe your solicitor, Mr. Davies, has sold the Ashworth emeralds, without your permission." Julian's eyes scanned the paper. His face, already pale with fatigue, turned to granite. "He what?" "He told them you were liquidating assets," Beatrice said, speaking quickly. "Mrs. Finch has been approving household accounts that are wildly inflated. I believe they are working together. I believe they are robbing you." Julian stood, his eyes blazing with a terrifying cold fury. He stared at the invoice, then at her. He didn't question her. He didn't doubt her. He saw the truth of it. "She," he said, his voice a low growl, "has been my aunt's personal maid for 20 years before I made her housekeeper, and Davies was my aunt's recommendation." The pieces clicked into place, dark and ugly. "It's not just Mrs. Finch," Beatrice whispered, the realization dawning. "It's Lady Ophelia." "My aunt," Julian said, his voice hollow. "She has been feeding information to Shaw. I've suspected a leak for months. I thought it was a clerk, a footman, but her." "Why?" Beatrice asked. "Why would she betray her own family?" "Because," Julian said, his face a mask of sudden, bitter understanding. "She has always blamed my father for the death of her own son. My cousin Robert. He was a wastrel, a gambler, but he was her son. When my father cut him off, Robert took his own life. She has been in mourning for a decade. She never forgave my father, and she has never loved me, for I am the heir who inherited what she felt belonged to her son." He looked at Beatrice, his grey eyes raw with a pain she had never seen. "She is not just stealing from me. She is helping Shaw destroy me. She wants the Devereux line to end, in ruin. With me." He strode to the bell pull. "Huxley, send for the constable, and tell Mrs. Finch and Mr. Davies, if he is here, that I require their presence in the library. Immediately." He turned back to Beatrice. The cold Duke was gone. In his place was a man bracing for war. "It seems, Your Grace," he said, his voice laced with a dark, new energy, "that our marriage of convenience is about to become far more interesting. Lord Shaw is attending the Duchess of Richmond's ball tomorrow night. As are we. And as," he added with a dangerous smile, "is my dear Aunt Ophelia." The Duchess of Richmond's ball was the event of the season, the air thick with perfume and the hum of 1,000 whispers. Every eye, it seemed, was on the new, mysterious Duchess of Ashworth. Beatrice, draped in the Ashworth diamonds, the ones that hadn't been stolen, felt like an imposter. Her hand tightened on Julian's arm. "They are all staring," she murmured. "Let them stare," Julian replied, his voice low and for her ears only. "You are the most beautiful woman in this room. You are my Duchess. Hold your head high." He gave her hand a brief, reassuring squeeze. The small human gesture sent a shock wave through her. This was not the cold man from the library. This was an ally. They had spent the day preparing. Mrs. Finch and the solicitor, Mr. Davies, had been confronted. The housekeeper had crumbled, confessing her role in the household theft and implicating Lady Ophelia as the mastermind. Davies had admitted to selling the emeralds and, more damningly, to passing copies of Julian's business correspondence to Lord Shaw. Julian had them both quietly detained in the house, waiting for the perfect moment to trap his aunt and his rival. Lady Ophelia, draped in mourning lilac, rushed toward them, her face a mask of concern. "Julian, Beatrice, my dear, how lovely you look. But Julian, darling, you look so strained. Are you well? I have heard the most worrying rumors about your shipping ventures." "I am perfectly well, Aunt," Julian said, his voice like polished ice. "Oh, good," she chirped. "Now run along, Julian. I must have a cause with Beatrice. We ladies have secrets to discuss." Julian met Beatrice's eyes. "This is it." He nodded and walked away, leaving Beatrice alone with the Viper. "Such a strong man, my nephew," Ophelia whispered, guiding Beatrice to an alcove. "But he has many enemies. Men like Lord Shaw." "Lord Shaw?" Beatrice asked, playing the part of the naive or worried wife. "Oh, he is ruthless," Ophelia said, leaning closer. "In fact, my dear, I fear for Julian. Lord Shaw has proof, letters. He is planning to present them to the Board of Trade tomorrow. It will be disastrous. He could lose everything." Beatrice put a trembling hand to her necklace. "No, he cannot. Lady Ophelia, you are his aunt. You must help him." Ophelia's eyes glittered, believing Beatrice was her new, unsuspecting puppet. There, child. I could speak to Lord Shaw, as a mediator, to soften the blow." "Would you?" Beatrice breathed. "Of course, my dear," Ophelia said, victorious. "He is just on the terrace. I will go to him now. I will tell him the family is prepared to be reasonable." She swept away. Beatrice did not stay put. She slipped through a side door and followed, hiding herself behind a massive potted palm on the stone terrace, the cold night air biting at her bare shoulders. She saw Julian, his back to her, in a tense conversation with Lord Shaw, and she saw Lady Ophelia arrive. "Gideon, my dear," Ophelia said, linking her arm through Shaw's. "I was just speaking with the new Duchess. Such a sweet, simple little thing. She is terrified." "As she should be," Shaw sneered. "Devereux is finished. The letters Davies provided are definitive." Yes, Ophelia hissed, her voice suddenly stripped of all sweetness. "But I have been thinking. Ruining Julian is one thing, but we can use the girl. You take the shipping interests, and I will manage the estate. I want him broken. He is the son of the man who murdered my Robert. I want him to have nothing. And you, my lady," a cold, deep voice said from the shadows, "will have exactly that." Julian stepped forward, his face a mask of cold rage. Lady Ophelia froze, her face turning a sickly grey. "Julian, I was trying to save you." "Save me?" he snapped. "You, who hired Davies to sell my mother's emeralds. You, who fed my business to this hyena." Lord Shaw, seeing the game was up, began to back away. "This is a family matter." "You are the matter, Shaw," Julian interrupted. "You built your entire strategy on stolen information. You are a common thief." "You cannot prove that," Shaw sneered. "Oh, but I can," a new voice said. Beatrice stepped out from behind the palm. As she did, another man, a uniformed constable, stepped from the shadows. "I have been standing here, at His Grace's request, for 10 minutes, the constable stated flatly. "I have heard every word. Conspiracy to defraud, theft. It is quite a list, my lady. Lord Shaw." Shaw was white. Julian delivered his ultimatum. "My solicitor's office. 9 tomorrow morning. You will relinquish all claims against my contracts and sell me your shares, or this man will have you in Newgate by noon." Trapped and beaten, Shaw gave a jerky, furious nod and was gone. Julian's gaze then fell on his aunt. She was trembling, a withered, terrified old woman. "Julian, please," she begged. "My son, and I," Julian said, his voice raw, "am your nephew, your blood, and you would have destroyed me." He looked at the constable. "Take her. Hold her at the house. The terrace was empty, save for them. The music and laughter from the ballroom seemed a world away. He stood before her, his hands clenched. "You knew she would follow you," he said. "I hoped she would," Beatrice replied, her heart hammering. "You are," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "The least foolish person I have ever met. I have been fighting this battle alone for so long." "You are not alone now," Beatrice whispered. His grey eyes, so often cold, blazed with a new, fierce light. He looked at her, truly saw her, and the entire, fragile architecture of their contract shattered. "Beatrice," he breathed, his hand moving to cup her jaw. And on the cold stone terrace, the Duke of Ashworth truly kissed his wife for the very first time. It was not a seal. It was not a contract. It was a revelation. The kiss on the terrace was a revelation, shattering their cold bargain. Back in the library, where it all began, Julian faced her, his voice thick with emotion. "The bargain is over, Beatrice," he said. "It was my father's pact, not mine." He gently slid the heavy sapphire ring, the pledge of the Dales, from her finger. "The contract is dissolved." Beatrice's heart ached, believing he was dismissing her now that his enemies were beaten. But then Julian shocked her. He threw the priceless heirloom ring across the room, calling it a worthless symbol of a debt. He reached into his waistcoat and revealed a slender gold band set with a single perfect diamond. "I bought this the day after our wedding," he confessed. "This is my promise." He dropped to one knee, his grey eyes raw with vulnerability. "Beatrice, I am not offering a contract. I am begging you. I love your strength, your fire. I love you. Will you truly marry me?" Tears of joy streamed down her face. "Yes," she whispered, dropping to her knees before him. "Yes, Julian, I will." He slid the new ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled her close, and in the firelight, their kiss was not an obligation, but a true beginning. What a journey. From a desperate girl in the rain to a brilliant duchess who saved her husband's entire legacy. Beatrice thought she was returning a simple ring to settle a debt, but she ended up becoming the iron-willed partner the Iron Duke never knew he needed. She didn't just win his respect, she won his heart, and in the end, she got the one thing she truly deserved, a proposal that wasn't a contract, but a true pledge of love. What did you think of Beatrice's courage? And what about that final, real proposal? If you loved this story of drama, mystery, and second chances, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a great historical romance, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have so many more dramatic and emotional stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for listening.